November 26, 1943. RAF Kimbolton, Station 117. The control tower crew huddles against the biting English wind, their eyes fixed on the southeastern horizon. A single dot appears, then another. But this is no returning formation. This is a lone bomber, trailing smoke from two dead engines, its aluminum skin perforated by 20mm cannon fire from Oberleutnant Friedrich Freischmidt's Messerschmitt Bf-110. The pilot calls in. His voice is calm. Too calm. He reports wounded aboard. He reports no hydraulics. And then, the words that freeze the blood of every man in that tower, landing gear will not deploy. I have no wheels to land. This is the story of Second Lieutenant S.H. Bender, a 22-year-old aircraft commander from the 379th Bombardment Group, 526th Bomb Squadron. His aircraft, AB-17G-10, DL Fortress, serial number 42 to 37,787, has carried him through the flak over Bremen and the cannon fire of a Luftwaffe ace. Now, that same machine has become his prison. And the question that hangs in the frigid November air is not whether he can evade the enemy, he already has. The question is whether he can survive the ground. To understand the 37-degree descent, one must first understand the machine. The Boeing B-17G Flying Fortress. 58 feet of fuselage, wings spanning 104 feet, powered by four Wright R-1820-97 Cyclone engines producing 1,200 horsepower each. A maximum takeoff weight of 65,000 pounds. In the parlance of the men who flew her, she was a lady stubborn, resilient, but unforgiving of error. Second Lieutenant Bender was not a man accustomed to error. A product of the Army Air Force's rigid training pipeline, he had transitioned from advanced flight school to the heavy bomber transition unit, then to the consolidated B-17 school, and finally to combat crew training. By November 1943, he had logged barely 300 hours total flight time. His co-pilot, Second Lieutenant H. Schmidt, sat at his right hand. Together, they were responsible for 10 souls, including their engineer, Sergeant L. Smith, radio operator Staff Sergeant H.A. Patron, and 5 gunners who had fought off Freischmidt's attack with .50 caliber Brownings as the Bf-110 closed to point-blank range. The target that day had been Bremen, a port city defended by the most concentrated flak corridor in Germany. The 379th Bomb Group had taken off before dawn, climbing through the overcast into a sky already crowded with contrails. At the lead navigator's mark, the bomb bay doors opened. 24 500-pound general-purpose bombs tumbled toward the submarine pens. And then the flak found them. Not accurate fire, not at first. But then the Luftwaffe fighters arrived. Freischmidt, a night fighter ace flying a radar-equipped Bf-110, slipped through the escort screen. His first burst shredded the number 3 engine. His second destroyed the hydraulic reservoir. His third struck the fuselage just aft of the cockpit, wounding the top turret gunner and sending shrapnel through the instrument panel. Bender held the aircraft steady. He feathered number 3. He ordered the gunners to conserve ammunition. And he turned west, toward England, with no hydraulics, 2 engines running hot, and a crew that looked at him with the silent question every combat crew asks, "Can you get us home?" Little did they know that the greatest test was still hours away. Pause. The North Sea, 1,300 hours. The B-17 has been airborne for over 6 hours. The wounded gunner, his leg wrapped in a field dressing soaked with sulfa powder, drifts in and out of consciousness. The engineer, Sergeant Smith, has crawled into the bomb bay to manually release any remaining ordnance, each step on the catwalk a vertiginous view of gray water 15,000 feet below. Bender calculates. With 2 engines feathered, his fuel consumption has nearly doubled. His airspeed indicator, damaged by shrapnel, fluctuates wildly. He flies by feel, the pressure of the control yoke, the vibration through the rudder pedals, the angle of the horizon beyond the plexiglass. His navigator, Lieutenant Newbold, plots a course using dead reckoning and the few radio bearings he can snatch through the static. By 1400 hours, the English coast appears. A miracle, some will say. But the miracle is fragile. Bender attempts to lower the landing gear. The emergency hand crank requires 29 turns of a heavy steel handle to mechanically lock the main gear into place. The co-pilot, Schmidt, takes the crank. 1 turn. 5. 10. The resistance is immense. The wind rushing past the wheel wells at 150 miles per hour fights him with every rotation. 15 turns. 20. The left main gear drops and locks with a satisfying thunk. But the right gear remains stubbornly retracted. The indicator light stays red. Bender circles over the field at RAF Combolton. Below, the runway stretches 5,000 feet of paved surface. It looks very small, very hard. The control tower suggests bailing out. The crew has parachutes. They can jump, drift down into the English countryside, and let the bomber fly itself into the mud of the fens. But the wounded gunner cannot jump. And Bender will not abandon his aircraft. This is not pride. It is the unspoken contract between a pilot and his crew. You brought them into the fight, you bring them out. By 1445 hours, the fuel gauges hover near empty. The number 2 engine sputters, catches, sputters again. Bender makes his decision. He will land wheels up. He will belly land a 65,000-pound flying fortress on its aluminum belly and pray that friction does not ignite the residual fuel in the wing tanks. But there is a problem. A wheels-up landing requires a specific attitude, the nose slightly high to absorb impact on the reinforced belly structure, the wings perfectly level to prevent a ground loop, the descent rate controlled within a razor-thin margin. Too steep, and the cockpit crushes. Too shallow, and the bomber slams into the runway like a skipping stone, cartwheeling into oblivion. Bender studies the approach end of the runway. He cannot see it. He cannot see it because he is holding the aircraft in a 37-degree nose-high attitude, a descent angle that places the entire runway beneath the glare shield, hidden from his view by the massive engine cowlings. He is landing blind. 37 degrees. To the men watching from the control tower, the bomber appears to be falling from the sky like a leaf. Its nose points toward the clouds, its tail droops dangerously low. The propellers of the 2 dead engines windmill in the slipstream, creating drag that pulls the aircraft asymmetrically to the right. Bender corrects with left rudder, but the rudder cables, stretched and frayed from the battle damage, respond sluggishly. 500 feet. The crew braces. The bombardier, Lieutenant Mullaney, has retreated to the radio room, the most reinforced section of the fuselage. The gunners cinch their seatbelt straps until the metal bites through their flight jackets. The co-pilot, Schmidt, places his hands against the instrument panel and prays. 300 feet. Bender cannot see the runway. He is flying entirely on instinct, the whisper of his instructor's voice from 6 months ago, a half-remembered lesson on emergency landings in the pine forests of Alabama. Keep the wings level. Feel the stall buffet. Let her settle. Don't force it. 100 feet. The ground rushes upward. The airfield's perimeter fence flashes beneath the bomber's belly. Bender cuts the remaining engines. The silence is deafening. For one eternal second, the B-17 hangs in the air, suspended between sky and earth. And then, impact. The belly strikes the runway with a sound like tearing linen, amplified 100 times. Sparks erupt from the aluminum skin. The fuselage shakes violently, throwing the crew against their restraints. The bomber skids, plowing a furrow of twisted metal into the tarmac. Bender holds the control yoke in his gut, keeping the wings level through sheer muscular force. The left wing dips. He corrects. It dips again. The right landing gear, still retracted, catches a runway light and shears off with a report like cannon fire. The bomber begins to yaw. Bender applies opposite rudder, nothing. The cables have snapped. The aircraft slides inexorably toward the grass verge, toward the soft earth that could flip the bomber onto its back and incinerate every man aboard. The control tower holds its collective breath. The fire trucks, their sirens already wailing, race alongside the careening fortress. For 12 agonizing seconds, the B-17 skids. Then, finally, blessedly, it comes to rest. Not on the runway, not in the grass, but balanced precariously at the edge of both, its nose pointed toward the control tower as if seeking approval. Silence. Then, over the intercom, "Is everyone all right?" One by one, the crew checks in. The wounded gunner is pale but alive. The engineer reports no fire. The navigator, his hands trembling, lights a cigarette. Bender sits motionless for a long moment. Then he reaches up, switches off the master ignition, and removes his helmet. His flight jacket is soaked through with sweat. What happened next would become legendary, not for medals or citations, though those would come, but for the quiet professionalism of a young man who refused to die in the sky. The question asked by every pilot who studied the incident afterward was simple: how did he see the runway? The answer is that he didn't. Bender's 37-degree approach was not a technique taught in any flight manual. It was not a procedure practiced in transition training. It was a desperate improvisation born of impossible constraints. With no hydraulics and the right main gear retracted, a conventional wheels-up landing would have required a shallow, flat descent, but that descent would have placed the bomber in ground effect too early, causing it to float past the runway threshold and crash beyond the airfield boundary. A steep, high-sink rate approach was the only option that guaranteed impact within the paved surface. But a steep approach in AB-17 means the engine cowlings block all forward visibility. The pilot cannot see the runway until the moment of touchdown, and by then, it is too late to correct. Bender's solution was revolutionary in its simplicity. He aligned the bomber with the runway centerline while still at pattern altitude. He established a precise rate of descent using his artificial horizon, the only instrument still functioning reliably. And then he instructed his co-pilot, Schmidt, to act as his eyes. Schmidt leaned across the center console, pressed his face against the side window, and called out altitude and alignment in 5-foot increments. 40 feet. Drifting right, correct left. 30 feet. 20. 10. 5. 4. 3. 2. 1. Contact. At the word contact, Bender pulled the yoke fully into his stomach, lifting the nose those final critical degrees. The belly struck first, not the nose, not the propellers, but the reinforced keel structure designed to absorb exactly this type of punishment. The impact was violent but survivable. The bomber slid, yawed, and stopped. Every man walked away. In the aftermath, maintenance crews crawled under the fuselage and marveled at what they found. The aluminum skin was abraded to paper thinness in places, but it had not ruptured. The bomb bay doors, crumpled but intact, had acted as a sled. The main spar, the structural backbone of the entire aircraft, was undamaged. Bender's 37-degree approach had aligned the bomber's belly perfectly with the runway's crown, distributing the impact load across the maximum possible surface area. It was, one investigating officer later wrote, the finest display of airmanship I have witnessed in this theater of operations. Bender, Schmidt, Newbold, Mullaney, Smith, Patron, Tate, Hyatt, Principe, and Svela, 10 names inscribed in the records of the 379th Bombardment Group, were processed through the repatriation system and, in the weeks that followed, reassigned to new aircraft. Some flew again. Some completed their 25 mission tours and returned to civilian life. Some stayed in the service and watched the dawn of the jet age from cockpit seats far removed from the flak-filled skies over Bremen. But the bomber itself never flew again. 42 to 37,787, the B-17G that had defied a Luftwaffe ace and survived a blind landing, was deemed beyond economical repair. Its belly had been skinned raw. Its right main landing gear had torn away from the wing attach points. Its control cables were shredded. The ground crews of the 526th Bomb Squadron stripped it of usable parts, engines, instruments, gun turrets, and the airframe was consigned to the salvage depot at RAF Watton. On February 6, 1945, another B-17G, serial number 43 to 37,595, crashed near Luton, Northamptonshire, with the loss of all 9 crew. That aircraft, investigators noted, had a curious history. It was the same B-17G that had once carried the designation 42 to 37,787. Rebuilt, renumbered, and returned to service, it had cheated death once. It could not do so twice. For Second Lieutenant Bender, no Medal of Honor awaited. No ticker tape parade. The Distinguished Flying Cross was awarded, as it was to thousands of other young men who performed extraordinary acts in ordinary skies. But among the veterans of the 379th, the story endured. They spoke of it in the mess halls of Kimbolton, in the bomber bars of East Anglia, in the quiet gatherings of old men 50 years later. The pilot who landed blind. The 37-degree approach. The wheels that never came down. They remembered not because the landing was flawless, it was not. They remembered because it was human. A young man, exhausted and afraid, sitting in a damaged machine with 10 lives in his hands, finding a way where no way existed. Not through heroics, but through competence. Not through glory, but through duty. Pause. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. The archives of the Army Air Forces contain thousands of similar incidents, each a testament to the men who climbed into aluminum tubes and threw themselves at the heart of the Third Reich. Some received medals. Most did not. All of them, whether they landed on wheels or on torn and battered bellies, carried with them the same burden, the knowledge that one mistake, one moment of indecision, would cost the lives of the men who trusted them. The B-17G Flying Fortress was called a fortress. But it was the men inside who made it so. Subscribe to Untold War Stories as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.